let's go ahead and start. Now, before I actually launch Perfect Photo Suite, I want to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to do in this webinar. It's on portrait retouching using Perfect Portrait. It's one of the modules of the go-to webinar, or of the Perfect Photo Suite 6. So you can see here I'm going to launch it by itself. Now, Perfect Photo Suite 6 is a standalone product, but it also works within Adobe Lightroom, Apple Aperture, and Photoshop. So you should not have any problems there. Now, in terms of what I want to do here, for those of you that may know me and my style of photography, I'm not a portrait photographer. I don't claim to be. I don't ever really want to be a portrait photographer, but I do appreciate it. And with that, it's also important to know how to work on a portrait image. A photographer, this is obviously an editorial note, but a photographer, they have their strengths. You play to your strengths, but I've always been under the impression that a photographer should study every aspect of photography: landscape, architecture, commercial product, stock, macro photography, floral, lifestyle, and portrait. I've shot weddings. I was the lead on several weddings of my own, enough that to realize I never want to do it again. But you have to know how to shoot. With that, a photographer, there are two components to photography these days in digital photography. There's the camera, and then there's the digital processing, the post-processing. The best photographer will know how to use their camera and know the tools that they have at their disposal after the fact. So nothing will substitute taking a good photo, a good portrait. Nothing will substitute making sure that the model's eyes are tack sharp, and that you have a proper depth of field, that you have not one eye's in focus and one eye's out of focus because you were shooting at 1.2. So let's go ahead here and we're going to start working on some images. And this is how I would work on the images. This is my style. It's gonna use Perfect Portrait, but we're also going to use some of the other products in the Perfect Photo Suite to show you how they're kind of married to each other, as it were. So I'm going to start off with this image here, and the reason why I want to start with it is because this is my sister. She came to visit me at the end of last year in December. I live in Portland now, Portland, Oregon, and we drove up to Seattle because it's not that bad of a drive, and I wanted her to see the Space Needle. She's never been to the Pacific Northwest, so I was like, let's just go up to the Space Needle. And she's a beautiful girl. I love my sister very much, and I took some shots of her. And so what we're going to first do is we're going to send this image to Perfect Portrait. And we can do that by bringing up Perfect Portrait from the module selector at the top right. And what will happen is Perfect Portrait will attempt to find a face. And it does. Oh, Dennis. Dennis is saying that the system shows sound is muted by organizer. Yeah, Dennis, everyone is muted except for me, so that no one can speak over each other. So don't worry about that. First thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna zoom in a bit to get a better look of her face. Look at her face. I'll zoom out just a bit there. So what I want to do is I want to start working on just refining the skin. And by default, when Perfect Portrait detects a face, it puts a bracket around the face. So you can see it found her face. It found the eyes, the mouth, and the skin. But it added, by default, will add a pretty intense amount of blemishes. Let me explain the difference between these two sliders: blemishes and smoothing. Blemishes, typically, let's turn everything off for a second. I'm going to zero those out. So here's the original skin right there. A lot of times when you see portrait retouching, what happens is the software is just cranking up smoothing, and you get this kind of really fake porcelain look. We don't want that. What we want is we want to fix the skin. So the way you fix skin is you basically want to retain pore structure. Think about it. Here, I could zoom in a bit more, Charles. The only reason why I don't want to zoom in too much is because now you're starting to see the compression, but that's fine. I'll zoom in here. What we want to do is I want to make the skin look healthier without making it look overly smooth. And so we built the blemishes slider. And this is the slider that you're going to want to use first. Because what it's doing is it's actually kind of fixing the skin while retaining pore structure. Everyone has pores, so you want to make sure that your skin looks natural. And so you can see how we're able to maintain pore structure. The original parts of her the characteristics of her skin are still there, but let's say you want to. Let's say you a lot of times I know portrait photographers who will have consultations with their the model that they're shooting, and they'll ask, do you want me to retouch your skin? Is there anything that you want me to keep? Maybe there's a scar or there's a particular birthmark or a beauty mark that is kind of a signature. You don't want to be presumptuous and remove it without asking. But sometimes there are people who say, you know what? Go to town, make me look beautiful. And so in those cases here, if you look on the toolbar on the left here, on the top left, our little tool well, there's a tool here called the Refine Retouch Brush. And what you do is, let's say you just want to kind of smooth out the skin, you can just draw on these little areas here, and it'll average out that area of the skin and smooth it out, so it removes that information. So let's say I spoke with my sister and I say, hey Greta, do you want me to fix your skin? And she would say, sure, go ahead. That's what I would do first, is I would use the Refine Retouch Brush. The next thing I would do is I would start retouching her skin. And like I said, the reason why the blemishes slider over here is the first one is because that's typically what you'll want to use. This slider here, this tool, is what separates Perfect Portrait from other retouching products, is because it doesn't add a gross amount of skin smoothing. Now, that's not to say that smoothing doesn't have a place. Smoothing is great because it adds a really nice glow to the skin. And so instead of cranking up the smoothing to fix the skin, I could use a lot less smoothing. And so the skin gets this really nice, healthy glow. There are 3 other sliders here. The thing I want to point out is that I'm under the Advanced tab. If you're new to the Perfect Photo Suite and you launch Perfect Portrait for the first time, the Advanced tab is not selected. You'll actually be on the Basic tab. But I like the Advanced tab, so I always click on that because it gives me all the tools. Let me see really quickly if there are any questions. The reason why it doesn't show textures and shadows, so Patricia's saying that her version doesn't have shadows or textures. That's because you might be in the Basic tab, Patricia. Yeah, there you go. Got the Advanced. Good. And it's one of those things where you might not see it because it kind of blends in with the interface, so I always like to bring it out. I want to point it out. So the Advanced tab, in Perfect Effects, Perfect Portrait, and Perfect Mask, there is a Basic and Advanced tab, so you'll want to keep that in mind. How do you keep the eyes from getting soft, Linda? So Linda's asking that. I can show you that right now. So if you want the eyes to keep from getting soft, what you do is you select the eye tool, and then we'll bring up the inspector. So the eye tool is right here, and we'll bring up the inspector. Now I was going to show you this in another image, but what we'll do is we'll bring up the inspector, which brings up this little window, and we'll make sure we're set to paint out, or rather paint in. And we'll just paint in the eyes, make sure that the eyes are selected, and then we can go to the skin retouch and paint out the eyes. Now the reason why they look soft, Patricia, is because I was zooming in. And as I'm getting closer and closer, we're at 200%, the image is starting to get compressed. You're starting to see the compression in the image. But that's neither here. I'll go over that in another image, I promise. So let me go over these 3 sliders over here. We've got the shine slider and the shadow slider. The shine slider will be used, they're kind of opposite, so think about it this way. Shine is used if let's say my sister had, it was really sunny and she had a hot spot on her face. If you wanted to minimize that hot spot, you would increase the shine. I think the default reaction is to think if I increase the shine, it's going to make things shinier. But that's not the case. It's actually reducing that. And the same thing is true for shadows. Let's say there was a deep shadow on her face. Let's say maybe there was a building that was casting a shadow on her face. If I increase the shadows, it'll kind of reduce the appearance of the shadow. So it's a shadow recovery. And then, excuse me, textures. Sometimes, look, sometimes you're working with a model that whose skin is just really, really, needs a lot of help. And so that means you're going to be using a lot of blemishes and a lot of smoothing. Excuse me. That's just the name of the game, right? Not everyone's perfect. And you don't always want to. Remember how I was saying earlier how you want to be careful when you're removing certain facial features of a person? The same thing could be said about blasting the face with smoothing. I'm sure the person, if they have poor skin, knows that they have poor skin. So you don't want to be totally obvious, which is partially why we built the blemishes brush, or the blemishes slider, was so that we can kind of not attack the self-esteem of the model. But, look, sometimes you do need to bring a lot of smoothing and a lot of blemishes recovery. In order to give the skin more of a natural look, you can reintroduce some skin texture using the texture slider. And so what it does, it adds a little bit of texture within the color range of the skin. In this case here, my sister doesn't need any, but that's what you would use the texture slider for, is if it's just really smooth, if you have to really crank up the smoothing, you can bring back some of that texture, and it adds a little bit of texture. You don't want to use that much. But there, that adds a little bit of nice texture to the image. And we don't need that much here. Let me go see if there are any questions. What's the use of face only? So Tom's asking this checkbox right here. What's the use of this face only checkbox? Let's say you're taking your image, and I'll show you this, Tom. But the short answer is when you have the face only selected by default, all these corrections for the skin retouching will only apply to whatever face detection is applied. So a lot of times I get asked the question, well, what if I'm working on a girl or a guy who is wearing a swimsuit? So the girl's wearing a bikini, for instance, and you want to have the same skin retouching to her shoulders, her neck, her chest. In those situations, you would deselect face only, and then the retouching would apply to the rest of the skin. So, that's basically what it is. Oh, you want to see before and after, John? Sure. So the way you do before and afters is hitting a Command P on a Mac or Control P on a PC. So here, oops, let me click here. That's the original. And so the skin just looks healthier, but we're not done yet. The next thing that I want to do is make sure that I get her eyes and her lips refined. So with the eyes, make sure we set the paint in, and I'm just going to draw on the eyes here. And then I'm going to bring the strength up to 100%, and I'm going to bring the whitening up. And what that does is it makes the eyes brighter. I can also bring the clarity. So the clarity adds some sharpness to the eyes, and it's really good if you have if you want to bring sharpness to eyelashes. The mouth, the same thing. The whitening slider for the mouth is primarily for teeth. So we're not going to touch that because she's smiling, but she's not showing her teeth. But vibrance will increase the kind of saturation of her lips. So it'll give a little bit more pop to her lips. We can also adjust the warmth. So under the skin tune, what skin tune is doing is it's when you send an image to perfect portrait and it finds a face, it detects what the mid-range color of the skin is. And then it'll automatically remove any color casts. So let's say you're shooting outside with a lot of grass. Sometimes you'll get a green color cast from the reflection of the grass from the light on the skin. This automatically removes it. Now, when I'm working with skin tune, I typically like to have the whole image up, like the full screen image, like this, because I'm affecting the overall color. So let's say here I want to kind of cool it off a bit. I can do that just by adjusting the warmth. And so here, this looks a lot more natural. So a few people are asking what these tabs at the bottom are. These tabs are presets. So if we bring up the preset bar here, and you can click the preset bar by clicking this little icon, we actually have presets here for based on gender. So we've got female, and then groups, and then male. So I don't typically use presets here and then we also have children. But if you wanted to get a kind of a starting, just kind of like a new starting point, you can select one of these presets. That's all they are. Oh, I'm not using. Oh, Donald, I'm not. The children. It's just selected by default. I'm not actually using anything in there. Can I show the icon? Yeah, Andrea, right over here in the bottom right here. See this little rectangle with 3 squares under it? That's what you'd click to bring up, and then you can click the big square to hide it. Alright, so let's go ahead and I'm going to hit apply because I'm done with the skin retouching. But we're not done with the image. I want to show you what I want to do with the image now. So when I hit apply, it brings it back to perfect layers. And what I want to do is I want to add a little bit. Let me close out the inspector here. I'm going to send this into perfect effects because you remember how I was saying at the beginning of the webinar, you know, I have a certain style. Even though I'm working on a portrait, I still like to infuse my own style. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to perfect effects because I want to further stylize the image. And so the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to add a glow to the image. I'm going to add a glow, kind of like an angel glow here. So I clicked on the glow category, and then I hit angel glow, and it adds a nice, really soft look to her. You can control the overall strength of the angel glow by using the strength slider over here. And so we've got a nice kind of very, very nice, almost ethereal glow. I'm going to keep that, and so I'm going to commit that by hitting add, which commits that effect, and it creates a new layer. And then I'm going to add a texture. So we have a whole bunch of textures here under the textures category. I'm going to scroll over and go to something like rice paper vignette. Now it adds the texture to the whole image, which I don't want to do. I don't want the texture to apply to my sister. And so I can use a masking brush here. So here's the masking brush, and I'm going to make sure that I'm set to paint out in my inspector, and I can basically mask out the texture from my sister. Now I'm going to leave a little bit of the texture towards the edges of her, and I'm not really taking my time here because I don't want to spend too much time brushing, but you can see how I'm able to control where the presence of the texture is and where it's actually removed or hidden using the masking brush. So here, again, just kind of a quick and dirty mask. Even though I say I'm not going to spend a lot of time, I always end up drawing. So with that, I'm going to hit apply. And you can see, let's just kind of take a look. We'll start over. Here's the original image. And then we did some retouching. Then we add some stylization. And I really could do a better job with the mask, but I wanted to give you an idea of what you can do here. So let's work on another image. And I see some questions about the skin tone, and I'll go over that in a second right now. Let's go ahead and work on another image. This image is really good for illustrating skin tone. So you can see this is an image here where there's a lot of color cast from the outside. And there's an image taken by Kevin Kubota. What we're going to do is we're going to send the image to Perfect Portrait, and excuse me, Perfect Portrait will automatically start detecting the face. When it detects the face, it's going to remove any color cast based on whatever the color of the skin is. And so there's a question as to what that correct scene is. So I'm going to let Perfect Portrait detect the face. And what it'll do is it'll start finding out, all right, this is the face, there's the skin color. Let's remove any extraneous colors. And that's what Skin Tune does by default. Now the question is, what's this correct scene? Well, you can deselect correct scene and it will not, when you have correct scene, it's going to remove the color cast from the entire image as well, which is what I typically like to do. But if you deselect it, it's going to retain that color cast in everywhere but the face. So here's a before and after. That's our original image. And that's just the standard sending it to perfect portrait. Now, it's a bit warm for my taste, so there's a warmth slider here which we can drop down a bit. And that'll add a little bit of a coolness to the image. So this looks a little bit better for me, at least. Now, granted, I'm also colorblind, but red-green colorblind, so sometimes portraiture work is not necessarily the best for me. Oh, so Dawn, you're not seeing the correct scene? You might be on the basic tab. Oh no, it should be under there as well. It's under the skin tune section of Perfect Portrait. Now, here's how I work on refining the face. This is kind of a more advanced way to do it, and I'll show you how we work on this. There are three primary components in Perfect Portrait. You can see them right here. There's the skin retouching, and then let's skip skin tune for a second. Then there's fixing eyes and fixing the mouth. So again, skin is 1, eyes are 2, mouth is 3. And they correspond to these 3 icons over here. Skin, eyes, mouth. And you have the ability to tell Perfect Portrait exactly where the skin is, where the eyes are, and where the mouth is, beyond the automatic detection. To do that, we'll select the skin the skin refine brush, and we'll bring the inspector up. So here's the inspector. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the show mask button, and I'm going to select overlay. And so here's what Perfect Portrait detected. See how it detected the skin of the face? It detected some of the neck, but it didn't detect the eyes or the mouth. It detected a little bit of her hair because the highlights of her hair were close in color to her skin. So what we want to do is we want to refine this mask. So the first thing I want to do is remove certain areas. And so I'm going to do that by hitting Paint Out using the painting mode here. And I'm going to draw out the hair. I'm also going to draw out the neck because I don't want any correction to her neck. I only want the correction to the skin on her face. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch right over to the eyes. I'll select the eyes, and I want to refine the eyes because it found them, but it didn't. I want to make sure that it finds every part of the eye, so I'm going to paint in right there. I'm also going to paint in on this left eye as well. And then finally, I'm going to go to the mouth. I'll select the mouth, and I'm going to paint in on. Actually, let me undo that stroke. I'm just going to paint in on the teeth here, and I'll paint in a little bit on the lips. Just so I can control the vibrance of the lips. I'll just fix this mask up. Oops. So you see what I'm doing? I'm basically controlling exactly where each mask is. Where the mouth mask is, where the eye mask is, and where the skin mask is. When I'm done making those selections, I'll change my show mask to none. And now I have control over each of the sliders. So, the first thing I'm going to do is let's start at 0. Okay. Here's the original image. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start with the blemishes slider. And usually with the blemishes slider, I'll go about halfway, right off the bat. I find that about 50% is a nice average starting point. After that, I'm going to bring the smoothing up, but just a tiny bit. Now, we can go to the work on the eyes and the mouth. I'll bring the strength up for the eyes to 100%. And you don't typically want the eyes to be too bright. You want them to stand out, but you don't want them to be like, the crazy bright. And then I'm going to bring up the clarity to add some sharpness. Next, I'll bring up the strength of the mouth. And the nice thing about the whitening slider under the mouth is that not only does it brighten teeth, but it also actually removes any yellow stains. So if you know your the model's drinks a lot of coffee, for instance, that typically stains the teeth. So you can see here how, let's do a before and after. Here's the original. Remember, we had that really funky color cast, and then here's what we were able to do with Perfect Portrait. Jendy's asking, how do you increase or decrease the size of the brush using it? If you want to increase or decrease the size of the brush with your keyboard, just use the bracket keys on your keyboard. So the left bracket key will make the brush smaller, and the right bracket key will make the brush larger. I am using Deb's saying, are you not using a Wacom tablet? I am using a Wacom tablet. I'm just not using the pressure sensitive controls. So what Deb's saying is, like, under here we have Wacom controls over here. I can use the pressure sensitivity to control the brush opacity, the brush size, or both. I just prefer not to. I like to control that information using these sliders up here. That's all that there is. Liv's asking, what does evenness do? That's a great question. So there's an evenness slider right here under Skin Tune. Oops, sorry, I closed it too quickly. The evenness slider will be used primarily if your model has splotchy skin. And what it does is, when you remember how I was saying what Skin Tune does is it finds whatever face is detected, and it looks for the mid-tone color, the average color of the skin. When it does that, if the skin is splotchy, you've got some darker patches. If you increase the evenness slider, it'll minimize those patches to give the skin a more even look. What about brightening the eyes, the bags under the eyes? That's a great question, Mike. So Mike's asking, could we do anything with the area under the eyes? We actually can. And Mike, thank you for bringing that up, because I meant to show you that, and I just kind of forgot with all the questions that people are asking. To do that, what I like to do is, you see this the refine brush right here? I like to select that, and then if I drop the opacity down to about 20%, where'd my cursor go? There it is. So let's drop the brush down there. Usually a lower opacity brush, if we kind of do these really soft swatches under the eyes, it softens that area up. And so because we're at our lower opacity, we can do it a few times without making it look fake. And so that does a nice job, actually. So you can see here, I'm just kind of softening that information, the area up. You don't want to remove those contours right there. You don't want to remove that line, because it will look unnatural. You're removing the sculpture of the face. So that does a nice job. Again, it's the retouch brush. That's the second icon on the tool well. And then all I did was I brought the inspector up by clicking on the eye right here at the bottom, and I dropped the opacity down. Does the evenness happen automatically, Susie's asking, or do you have to brush it in? It'll happen on whatever, it'll happen automatically in the area that you have the face detected. If you wanted, let's say you wanted to have the evenness and the correction applied, say, to her arms, here's how you would do it, because I see a few questions there. So right now, all of the corrections being localized to the face. What if we wanted on the arms and the neck and the chest? Well, again, we go to the skin brush, the little silhouette, and with our inspector up, we turn on the mask to overlay. So let's turn overlay on. Okay, so here we have our mask, and remember, only the face is detected. So we're going to turn paint in on, and we're going to draw on the areas that we want to preserve. So here you can see, and I'm just kind of again, just like before with my previous image of my sister, I'm just kind of doing a quick mask, and I'm drawing in the areas that I want the correction to apply to. So here we go. Now, if we turn that off, everything that we did before will apply here. You can see now that the skin tune is applied here, the blemishes slider, the color filter, so the temperature, the cooling is applied, and so that's how you're going to get that. I prefer doing it that way than turning off the face only. If I turned off the face only, it would do the same thing, but I like controlling exactly where the correction is being applied to. So I hope that makes sense. Deb's asking an interesting question. So Deb's wondering, can you have two different settings, one for the face and one for the body? My default inclination, Deb, is to say it's a universal, but this is kind of going to be kind of laboratory science. So let's do this. I'm going to cancel out of here. So this is going to be an interesting thing. So what Deb is saying, all right, can I have, say, less smoothing on the arms and the neck than the face? Here's what we're going to do. Let me bring Perfect Photo Suite back up. And let's work on an image, this image here, our couple image right here. Two faces. One face is has eyes closed. One face is distorted. Or not distorted, but skewed. She's looking over to the camera left. Let's go to portrait, and let's see if we can do this. I think we might be able to do something, but I'm not 100% sure. So here's what happens in Perfect Portrait. Perfect Portrait's able to find the first face, but it can't find the second face. And so let me give you a little insight of how Perfect Portrait works. The face detection is basically looking for two eyes. That's the kind of first step that the face detection has. And because the bride's face is skewed and it only has one eye showing, it won't find the face. That's not to say that you can't work on this face independently. We can do this by hitting Add. So under the Faces palette, I'm going to click Add, and now a face box comes up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to position the face, or the box rather. Let me drop the size down a bit, just so that it covers her face right here. And then I'm going to hit Apply. So Perfect Portrait's going to create a selection here. You can see that it has its own layer, so we have two independent areas. So I'm just turning that layer on. And so watch, I want to see what the mask looked like. So if I go to the skin, again, the skin mask, and I bring the inspector up, let's go to overlay, you can see just how beautiful of a mask it is. You can see how it only detected the contour of her face. It's not applying correction to the groom. The groom is on his own layer. But we can refine this. So here, Deb, to your point, let's see if we can get, and this is, I'm just experimenting right now, but this could be a cool thing. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select Paint Out, and I'm going to remove the neck. I just want the face. So here we have this. Now I'm going to click Add again, and I'm going to put it over this area, and I'll hit Apply. Just so that area of, so here you can see how we have a third layer. And the reason why we have this pattern is because we still have the overlay on, so let's turn that off. So now we have a third pattern. I'm going to turn that on, and just like before, I'm going to bring the mask up, overlay. You can see now how we have, it detected the skin. So watch, oh, oops, I'm going to paint out, I want to be paint in. I'm just going to paint in the area of the neck and the chest and the arms. So this is our new mask. So watch. Mask 3, Mask 2, Mask 1. Groom's face, bride's body. So to that point, Deb, I'm glad that my little experiment worked. That's how you would do separate things. Now, for the face, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up the Skin Refine brush, and I'm going to adjust the mask here because it didn't detect all of the groom's face. So I'm just going to select here and draw in here. Oops, and I don't necessarily need his hair, and I don't need the outside part of the scene. Alright, then I'm going to go to the... Now, in terms of the eyes, there's nothing I need to do with the eyes because the groom's face is... His eyes are closed, his mouth is closed, so I don't need to do any masking here. For the groom, what I want to do is I want to go to the eye tool, and I want to select the eye right there. So I'm just kind of making a selection around the eye. And then the same thing with her mouth. She's not showing her teeth, so I'm not worried about that. Now I can turn the mask off and we can start correcting. And here's the great thing. I can give, because we have separate layers, for the groom, I'm going to drop the blemishes slider. Men typically have a bit more texture, so I'm going to drop both settings down, give him a bit more of a natural look. I'm going to go to the groom, the bride now. Now notice the bride has her own settings. I'm going to drop this down a bit, and I'm going to give her a bit more glow. And then for the skin on her body, I'm going to bring up a lot of smoothing. And I'm also going to bring up the retouch brush. So that I can kind of, you see how she has some just darker spots? I just want to fix those up a bit. And so you can see how we have 3 independent settings. Oh, can I fix the darker spots with the evenness? That's a great question. Yeah. We can go here to the phase 3 here. Oh, you know what? No, I don't think we can actually, because when you manually detect a face, let me see here. If I turn it back on, I think when you manually detect a face, skin tune is not turned on. Oh, no. Scratch that. Scratch that. Skin tune is a global thing. So what we're going to do is we can increase the evenness, and that should affect that. And I'm also going to drop the warmth, because it's a bit too warm. That's a bit too cool. So we got that. Craig's asking, is there a shortcut to change from paint in and paint out? Yes, it's just X. So watch. Let me bring the inspector up. So you see here how it says paint. The painting mode right here is paint in. If you want a keyboard shortcut to switch from paint in and paint out, just press the X key. Also, I don't know if you guys know this, but under Help, we have a Show Keyboard Shortcuts. And so it actually has all of the keyboard shortcuts. So right here, paint and paint out is X. Excuse me. Then for the groom, the question is, who's just asking that? Linda, the shine slider for the groom. Yeah, we can take the shine slider and bring that up, and that will remove or minimize the shine. You don't want to do it too much because shadow and highlights also sculpt the face. And so if you increase the shadow and shine recovery, you're flattening the face. The ethnicity choice, so I have a few questions about the ethnicity choice. The ethnicity choice is basically a preset. So if you want to have a certain preset here of settings, you can do that. I typically leave it. I don't touch the ethnicity slider. But if you want to have a preset, say, and go to, for instance, if you want more of an African skin tone, you can do that. And then we can, basically what it does is it controls the color shift. We can drop the warmth a bit. But you can see how basically we can get back to the same area. Good question, Steve. Steven's bringing up an area of her neck that was not masked in, so all we need to do is go to the mask with her face here, bring up the inspector, make sure we're set to paint in, and just kind of paint in. There we go. There was a lapse in the 2 masks here, so Hawkeye's over there. Very nice. What's the color shift? That's a great question, Sally. Sally's asking, what's the color shift? The color shift allows you... Let me just get back into perfect portrait here. and go to the correct layer. What color shift is, it allows you to control the hue of the skin. So if you want to tweak the color of the skin within a certain range, you can use the color shift slider. Yeah, correct. So for Jerry and Dan, the retouching is not global. The retouching is per layer. Skin tune is global. That you can see how it's only working on one layer, but it's working for the whole image. So I hope that clarifies. Are these 3 layers preserved in Photoshop? Lawrence, no, because these are layers within Perfect Portrait. So to that point, let's say I go here and I hit apply. I'll answer your question. These layers will not appear in Photoshop. However, when I hit apply, I'm going to return back to perfect layers. And I'll show you, I want to illustrate how this works. Alright, so we're in perfect layers now. Let's say, just for instance, we'll go to perfect effects. And I'm going to add just a quick effect. We can add a blur, or not a blur, a glow. So here, we'll add glow. And I'll add, again, angel glow. I like angel glow for people. And then we'll hit apply. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to save this as a PSD file. So you can see here, we've got 5 layers. And let's rename this one to Final. We'll go here, we'll go to File, Save As, and I'll just save this to my desktop. Alright, Lawrence, so check this out. So here's the PSD file. If I drag this onto Photoshop, we'll just let Photoshop launch for a second. The one thing I want to illustrate is this. All the layers are preserved. You can see the 5 layers with the layer titles. So all of that is there. The only thing that's not preserved is are the layers within the actual modules, because that's kind of self-contained. Steve's asking if there is a search function for, hey Peter, for your favorite effects. Search is coming actually, Steven. So it's not there yet, but it can. Joanna wants to see how to work with this in Aperture. Absolutely. So let's quit out of Photoshop. I think I have Aperture installed. Or did I not install Aperture yet? Wait, one second. Let me see here. I thought no, I don't have. Oh, I don't even have Aperture installed. This is a new build of this machine here. So I'll get Aperture installed, and I apologize for that. But basically, what you would do from Aperture is you would just select the image, and then you'd go Edit Photo with Plugin. And it would send it to Perfect Photo Suite. Rhoda's asking if this works the same on a PC. Absolutely. How about in Lightroom? That I can show you, George. I know I have Lightroom installed. So here's the original image. Now, if we want to get it into the Perfect Photo Suite, you just go to File, Plugin Extras, and select Perfect Photo Suite. And that will send a copy of the image to the Perfect Photo Suite. So if I click here, you see how it sends it automatically. And so when you do your work and you hit save, it returns back to Lightroom with the updated changes as a PSD file.